On the 4th of May 1799, the river island fortress of Seringapatam, the stronghold of Tipu Sultan, the Tiger of Mysore, stood silent under a blistering sun. Around it, 26,000 soldiers of the British and Company armies had gathered, ready to strike. Tipu's world teetered on a knife's edge. If the monsoon rains came soon, rising waters would cut off British supplies and communications, turning the rivers into moats and giving him the advantage. But time was slipping fast. The British had broken through the outer walls, and inside the fortress the tiger waited. For Tipu, war was no mere territorial contest. It was betrayal, injustice, survival. In his youth he had seen British treachery, allied with Mysore one moment, abandoning it the next when the Marathas invaded. That treason taught him the true face of Company promises. His solution: modernize his army. He reorganized it along European lines, trained by French officers, and built factories to produce muskets and cannon. He even adopted war rockets. All this to defend against what he viewed not as Indian rivals, but as foreign invaders bent on total domination. When Tipu invaded Company ally Travancore, war was inevitable. The disastrous Third Anglo-Mysore War ended with grievous losses. Half his territories gone, sons held hostage, defeat and humiliation. But by 1799 he had rebuilt, rearmed, and steeled his resolve. Europe was in chaos, France and Britain at each other's throat, and Tipu hoped this global war might tip the balance in his favor. For the Company it was the perfect excuse. The new Governor-General, Richard Wellesley, had bigger ambitions than land squabbles. He wanted empire. And this time he'd bring down the tiger once and for all. As the British troops encircled Seringapatam, order began. Engineers dug trenches, built siege batteries, moving ever closer. Day after day the walls were hammered by artillery. But Tipu's sharpshooters and rocket batteries struck back with ferocity. Company cannonballs soared, and sometimes rockets streaked through the air like fiery demons. All the while, Tipu waited, watching the skies for rain, counting on time as his ally. Inside the fortress, the tension mounted. Tipu ordered scorched earth tactics beyond the walls. Crops destroyed, villages emptied, denying the British any chance of supplies. He withdrew his forces to the island stronghold, relying on water defenses and thick walls studded with cannons. Estimates of his defenders ranged from 30,000 to 37,000 men. He armed them with muskets, rockets, even mines beneath the walls, and prepared for the final stand. Water surrounded the fortress on three sides. And on the fourth lay a wall weakened by age. The date was fixed, the 4th of May, 1 p.m. Under a blistering midday sun, already burning men's skin, the assault would begin. Why so hot? The British believed it strategic. The fortress guards changed shift at 1 o'clock. Confusion and movement meant weakness. And the heat would sap defenders' energy. Perhaps a few of Tipu's officers, busy feeding men or organizing supplies, would slip away. Maybe even some troops would be diverted for payrolls or rest. Among British officers stood a man whose past still haunted him, David Baird. 20 years earlier he'd been captured by Tipu's forces at a shocking defeat. Tortured, imprisoned, chained, starved, he spent almost 4 years in a dungeon beneath this very fortress. Now he stood poised to storm it. Revenge at last had come. Leading the initial assault was a unit known in grim terms, the Forlorn Hope. Their mission was simple and deadly: run straight into the breach, climb the shattered wall, hold it long enough for the main columns to pour in. Surviving meant promotion. Dying meant oblivion. At their head was Sergeant William Graham of the 73rd Highlanders with just a dozen men and some company sepoys. They were promised advancement if they survived, but chances were slim. They ran forward across open ground under cannon fire. Canister shot turned stone and earth into a deadly hailstorm. Musket fire rattled. Men fell screaming, throats torn. Still, Graham charged. His men followed. They scrambled up rubble slick with blood and sweat. At the top he shouted, "Lieutenant Graham," a roar of defiance and ambition. In that moment, a musket ball slammed into his skull. He collapsed, dead, yet his sacrifice was not in vain. That first foothold was enough. The breach was taken. Behind him surged 4,000 men, British regulars, company sepoys, Swiss mercenaries, artillerymen, all driven by orders: fix bayonets, Don't stop, don't fire, don't rest. Move, move, move! The British saw opportunity. Their engineers pinpointed that older western wall, less reinforced, more vulnerable. Under cover of darkness, work parties labored to dig approach trenches, build earth ramparts for batteries, move heavy guns into position. They worked silently, under cover of night, avoiding Mysore's fire by day. Rocket volleys from the defenders would light up the night skies, ironclad rockets trailing sparks, crashing onto British positions. The explosions were terrifying, if not precise. A company artillery officer, Colonel Edward Montague, was mortally wounded by one such rocket. The fear was real. Rockets might not hit their mark, but their psychological impact was immense. Then disaster struck for Tipu's defenders. Late on the 2nd of May, a magazine storing rockets exploded within the fortress. Flames erupted, a hellish fireworks display that destroyed a significant portion of Tipu's rocket capability. The timing was brutal. Just as his defenses wavered, the fortress's thunder stopped. Seizing the moment, the British coordinated their final bombardment. On the morning of the 3rd of May, the guns roared. By evening, their artillery had shredded the western wall, creating a breach. Unknown to Tipu, the mines laid under that breach, his final trap, were accidentally triggered by a stray shell. The wall crumbled wider. The trap was lost. The breach lay open. Words spread through the British camp. The fortress had a wound. A chance, a final push. As the mass of attackers poured into the breach, chaos exploded. The ramparts erupted in mayhem. Muskets cracked, grenades burst, steel clashed. The air thickened with smoke, dust, and screams. Men slipped on blood-soaked stone, tripped over corpses, stumbled forward, or fell back into death. Tipu's defenders fought with unparalleled ferocity. Alleyways turned into killing zones. Narrow streets became ambush corridors. Behind every wall lurked a rifleman. Around every corner, someone ready to stab or fire. It was close, personal, brutal. But the British pressed on. The 73rd and 74th Highlanders, the 12th Foot, the Swiss Dameron Regiment, and the company sepoys clawed their way up the walls, fought along bastions, scaled ramparts. Sword clashed against sword, bayonets thrust, rifles fired point blank. Amid the carnage, soldiers whispered in fear and awe. Was that the Tiger himself fighting? Some claimed they saw a lone officer wielding 2 hunting rifles, firing alternately with ruthless precision. Shot after shot, men dropped. Fear spread fast. Tipu Sultan, the very man they had sworn to kill, was fighting at the heart of the fortress. As afternoon bled into dusk, the British slowly but steadily gained ground. Bastion by bastion, they cleared the walls. The defenders, exhausted and bleeding, began to collapse. Surrender became the only option. And then, a moment of horror and disbelief. Reports came in. The dreaded Watergate, the fortress's main escape and supply route, had been breached internally. Some troops claimed that they had seen shadows moving, rifles flashing, figures falling. Whispers, is he alive? Did he escape? But somewhere near that gate, among fallen guards, lay a body. Wounded, bloodied, lifeless. The Tiger of Mysore, fallen at last. Even as the fortress fell, the sense of disbelief lingered. Could the Tiger really be gone? Could the man who defied an empire, who turned rockets and muskets into terror for the British, truly lie dead among his own guards? Arthur Wellesley, the young colonel unknown then, but destined for greatness, and General Baird led the grim search. Through corridors drenched in blood, past broken weapons and silent bodies, they moved carefully, step by step. Every turn promised ambush. Every room, deception. But the signs led them to the Watergate. There lay the body, still, pale, stripped, bloodied. A musket ball had entered above the right ear, lodging in the left cheek. More wounds marred the chest. Jewels had been torn from rings and belts. The spoils already looted. Tipu Sultan was dead. The Tiger of Mysore, slain, his roar silenced. A hush fell over the fortress. The guns quieted. The walls, once echoing with battle cries, stood silent in the twilight. And yet, the fall of Tipu was only the beginning of something darker. For once the fortress gates opened, soldiers of the British Empire and the company poured in, not to secure walls but to plunder. Orders had been strict. No looting. But as night fell, discipline crumbled. The lure of gold, silks, jewels, treasures, all locked away within the palace, was too strong. Soldiers ransacked halls and rooms, looted chests, tore down walls in search of hidden caches. And among the countless spoils was a grotesque prize, the infamous mechanical tiger, a life-size automaton of a tiger mauling a British soldier, its jaws snapping, hidden organ pipes producing roars and screams when you turned a crank. A ghastly symbol of Tipu's hatred for the British. It was taken to London, displayed as a trophy. A cruel monument to conquest. Private soldiers received a modest share, about £7 each. But to them, that was a fortune. General Harris, commander-in-chief, walked away with over £100,000. In today's money, perhaps well over £14 million. With that, he built mansions, bought estates. A small fortune born from death and devastation. And the men who had stormed the fortress, some lionized, some forgotten. Baird believed his sacrifice and courage would earn him command of the conquered fort. Instead, the honor went to Wellesley. The young colonel, just 28, would later rise far above his peers, but in that moment, Baird felt the sting of betrayal anew. But the fall of Tipu Sultan had consequences far beyond looted gold and shifting careers. Among the seized spoils were thousands of rockets, ironclad, deadly, revolutionary. The British studied them, experimented. The designs given birth to what became known as the Congreve rocket. Within a few years, these rockets became a fearsome weapon for the British, used in Europe against Napoleonic forces, and even across the Atlantic during the War of 1812. The same fiery rockets that lit up the night sky over Indian walls would later blaze over American harbors. The rocket's red glare of the future truly began here. And politically, the map of southern India was redrawn. Mysore, once a proud and powerful kingdom, was reduced to a puppet under company control. The old Hindu rulers, displaced decades earlier by Tipu's father, were restored, but only as figureheads. Real power lay with the British and their allies, the Nizam of Hyderabad, the Marathas, and mercenaries. For France, any hope of using Mysore as a wedge against British India vanished. Their last serious native ally was now gone. The door was closed. Empire building began in earnest. Back in Britain and Europe, young Arthur Wellesley's star rose. The man who had cut his teeth in India, fighting through heat, death, and betrayal, would one day face Napoleon himself. And he would win. Nearly 4 hours of chaos, bloodshed, and smoke. 4 hours that changed the fate of a subcontinent. 4 hours that silenced the roar but kindled new fires, rockets, empire, dominance. Tipu Sultan, bold, defiant, warlord, ruler, now lay forgotten under silent stones. His mechanical tiger stood in foreign museums. His rockets were rebranded, refined, used across seas. His kingdom was governed by puppet rulers. David Baird, tortured prisoner turned victorious commander, would never receive the glory he believed was his. Though valiant and scarred, he remained overshadowed by Wellesley, the man who seized the timing, seized the fortress, and the fame. The British victory at Seringapatam did more than crush a fortress. It shattered hope of native resistance, of independence. It paved the road for the British Raj to stretch across India, unchallenged by any European rival. But history has a memory. On this channel name, we remember. We remember the roar that once shook walls. We remember the men who died charging through fire and stone. We remember the price paid for empire. Because the fall of the Tiger's fortress wasn't just a battle. It was a reckoning, a turning point. A beginning of an age. And its echoes, in empires, rockets, and revolution, would ring across centuries and continents.